Hello and welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. I am your man J.P. and today, what are we doing today? Well, I was kind of racking my brain. What do I talk about next? What do I do next on the channel? So, I figured since I've already talked about each individual Galoob figure, each individual Hasbro figure, and each individual Mattel Retro, why not just move on to the next series that I have? And so I decided to talk about the Jakks Pacific figures. Now, this series is not going to take very long because I only have 3. But we'll start with this guy right here. This is Hunter Hearst Helmsly. Now, I just talked about 1995 WWF, how there were no action figures in 95. But in 96, that's when the WWF and Jakks Pacific started producing these action figures here. It's articulated a little bit. You know, the arms and legs move and stuff. But, yeah, so when these first came out, I didn't really like the looks of them because some of the ones that they were coming out with were like kind of really overblown. Like especially like the Bret Hart figure, it just looked like the legs were just way over buffed and his arms are like just kind of ripped like unrealistically, and they basically looked like comic book characters, and I didn't like the looks of them. So that's when I decided, I'm not gonna collect those. Actually, me and Joe, he's been mentioned on the show, on this channel. He's been on the channel. When him and I first saw them, we both agreed that they just looked ridiculous, and we didn't like them. But until one day, when I was with him at his job, he worked at a video store and flea market. Now, for those of you that are younger that might be watching this channel, they used to have these places called video stores where you could go and rent like physical copy movies. And then when you're done watching them, you bring them back. So this video store also had a booth at this flea market on weekends. So Joe would work at the flea market, and then when that closed, he would go work at the video store. And a lot of times I would go with him, and I would spend the whole weekend with him, hanging with him at the flea market and at the video store. But so one day he was kind of taking a break from the booth, and we were kind of walking around, and there was this guy known as the toy guy. And so he had all kinds of different toys. A lot of them were just like old, like McDonald's Happy Meal toys. But he also had some WWF action figures, some of these. But they were the Legion of Doom. And we were both looking at these like going, actually, those are actually pretty cool looking because they weren't like overblown. You know, they were just looked like regular. So that's kind of when we decided, okay, you know, we can get over the fact that some of them look ridiculous. Because honestly, a lot of the Hasbros were ridiculous. You know, so that's when we decided that we were going to start collecting these Jakks Pacific bone crunching action figures. And I don't remember specifically like the first one that I got, but I just remember that we started collecting them, and we started, you know, having our own storylines, doing shows, and you know, we got the big monster ring that came with these. Now the monster ring, for those of you who don't remember or ever collected these, the monster ring was basically just the old WWF LJN ring that they repackaged and repurposed for the sake of these figures. The problem was that ring was too big for these figures. Like the ropes would come like way above their head, like the top rope would. So what we did was Joe like lowered all the ropes so that the ropes were at a more reasonable height for these figures. So that just meant that the bottom rope was like really, really, really close to the floor of the ring. But anyway, we had a lot of fun playing with these. A lot of fun playing with these. I mean, even though later on a lot of them were like from Attitude Era guys, but we still had a lot of fun with them. I We've kind of gone back and kind of wondered how we had a lot of fun with them, because sometimes like this type of vinyl rubber, sometimes the paint would get kind of over time would get kind of sticky, and the figures became kind of hard to use, and they would kind of stick together, and it was just kind of hard to use. But all back then, man, we had so much fun with these. So this one is Hunter Hearst Helmsly. Like I said, now Hunter Hearst came into the WWF in 1995, like I've mentioned before. But he had kind of this character that was kind of an aristocratic kind of blue blood, like turning his nose up at everything, like, oh, I'm so much better than you because I have money and I move in such a way that's, my moves are just kind of graceful and flowing, and I can out wrestle anybody. And he was actually a pretty good character. He was actually one of the few like really good characters in 1995 that obviously, because he stuck around and he's still with the company to this day. He doesn't wrestle, but he's with the company, and he has a very, very high position in the company. But no, this is the early days of Hunter Hearst Helmsley. This figure is okay. It's not real good, but he was there in '95, and he was there through '96. But as the storylines progressed, and as WWF got closer and closer and closer to the Attitude Era, his character kind of evolved, like with the times, and he kind of went with the Attitude Era. And after a while, he started calling himself Triple H. Instead of Hunter Hearst Helmsley, it was just Triple H. And then with Shawn Michaels, he formed a group called Generation X, which I didn't care about. I didn't care about DX, but nevertheless, they, kind of did a bunch of, like I mentioned before, it was kind of shenanigans and just juvenile things that they did and said and everything. So, but then Shawn Michaels kind of went away, and then he kept DX going with a few new members. And, they would go for a while. He won the Intercontinental title from, I think it was The Rock, during a ladder match at SummerSlam. And then after a while, though, he was kind of thinking, man, I think I'm good enough to where I could be the champion. I could be like the champion. So he left DX as a group, and he went out on his own, and eventually he did win the WWF Heavyweight Championship. Now, back in those days, the WWF Championship was, all honestly, it was kind of a revolving door. It was kind of like, who's the employee of the month? It seemed like, it felt like anyway. Because back in Hulk Hogan's day, I mean, he was champion for like 3 or 4 years straight. And before that, Bob Backlund was champion for like 5 years straight, or 8 years, or whatever it was. I think it was 5 years. And before that, Bruno Sammartino was champion for 8 years. It was just, the champion was champion for a long time. But once the Attitude Era hit, it was just kind of a revolving door, because there were a lot of guys that were kind of at that top tier level. Triple H was one of them. The Rock, the Stone Colds, all those guys were at a top tier level. So the title changed hands more often. But nevertheless, so he progressed on in his career, winning multiple world championships, until eventually he got to a point where his body just couldn't take it anymore. I think he eventually had a pacemaker put in, and that's ultimately what led to him having to retire, is he can't do it anymore. But now, I think he's in charge of like NXT, and he's like training guys, and he's got some creative control in the WWE, but not enough, I don't think. But I don't know. I don't really follow it too heavily now. I just know that he's still there, and he's still with the company. But like I said, this figure's okay. It's a little articulated. It's not as fully articulated as some of the modern figures. But Jakks Pacific later on, they went with a different style of figure. Later on, Jakks Pacific started making fully articulated and fully posable figures. But I prefer these. So Anyway, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And that is going to do it for this video. So if you are new here, go ahead and like and subscribe and share if you want. And I will see you next time.